Good morning. Today, is the 23rd of Cheshvan, the 7th of November, and we're up to the third reading of Parashat Chayei. And in today's reading, Eliezer, Abraham's servant, he's never called by name actually, maybe a little bit later, but not now. And he's on his way. He travels with 10 camels to Haran, to the city where Abraham came from, where his family was left, on their way to Canaan. They never came down, they never went down south. We explained the meaning of that, of moving southward, moving towards more and more faith in last week, I believe, or 2 weeks ago actually. And now he comes to the well in this city. Amazingly, if you're interested, you can actually find the well today. You can go on Google Earth, and you have to go to the city called Haran. There's still the city. I believe last time I looked, it was the south of Turkey. And there is a custom there. There's a tradition about a specific well. You can look up it. You can look it up on the internet, and then cross-reference it with the Google Earth, and you can actually see the place, or at least what it looks like today. In any case, so he arrives there, and he makes a deal with God, as it were. And there's a whole question about whether one can make deals like this, and what exactly they mean. He says, I want a sign. We spoke about this in the past, that when someone is looking for signs, that's called small faith, or minor faith. That one should be independent of these signs and know what God wants from them and pursue it without question about whether it seems to them that God is pushing them along by giving them all kinds of signs that they're on the right path. In any case, Eliezer does this. He makes a sign. The sign is that the first girl that comes down to the well and who offers to draw water for the camels, these 10 camels, she will be the one that God has declared will be the right match for Isaac. There's always a small question that troubles people. Why would Eliezer, a grown man who probably even had, why did he take 10 camels? He probably had a lot of people with him. Why did he make a sign like this, that a little girl should be able to draw water for 10 camels when able-bodied men are standing by and watching her? And what girl would do that in the first place? So this I heard from Yoel Elitzur, who was a famous Bible scholar, and he told me once I think we were talking privately, and he told me once that the mystery was solved when he once went to an Arab village and he saw that over the local well there was a sign that had literally hours for men and hours for women. And so what Eliezer had done was he had come in the middle of the hours for women, so he couldn't go down to the well. And so he was at the mercy of any woman that would go down and bring the water for the camels. He said that was apparently the simple exposition and meaning of what the sign was meant to indicate, that there was no other way for him to get the water. And so it would make sense. But the way that we understand it is that it's much, much deeper than that. It's not just a question of technically being able to or not being able to. There are other possibilities usually, especially if you're traveling with many camels. You could travel with water. And especially since we also know that they arrived in one day. They had what we call a leap of the earth. And so even though this would be a 10-day journey or a 20-day journey, he made it in one day. So the camels were probably not very tired. They weren't, and he did this on purpose. And what is the purpose of all of this? What is going on here? Camel in Hebrew is actually almost the same word. Probably that the origin of the word camel in English comes from gamal, which is the word in Hebrew. And it also means, gamal means to perform an act of kindness. Gomel dalim, gomel chasadim, a person who gives of himself. The camels here represent the whole idea here of finding a match for Isaac was to search for someone who could convert their abilities into serving others, into giving to others. That was, in its essence, the test. Now, he took a test that was very, very large, meaning he's coming with 10 camels. It's almost like he's saying, whoever can do as much as is equal to 10 camels worth of kindness, that is the woman that I seek. What is this all about? When Adam and Eve ate from the tree of knowledge, they were convinced by the serpent's argument that if you eat from the tree of knowledge, you will know good and evil, like God. The way we understand this in the plain meaning is that you will know the difference between good and evil. Understanding the difference between good and evil is the basis of all human development. Why do we say this? Because if all we were in this world to do was to physically, materially build it, then we wouldn't have needed a soul. All we would need is, like every other animal has a spiritual part, we would only need a spiritual part whose duty was to ensure our survival. Just like the spiritual part in every animal, the soul in every animal that is in it until the day that it dies and then the soul departs, is only there to ensure the survivability of the creature. But by human beings, our role is to develop something higher, which we call the image of God within us. And so, what the serpent actually told them was, if you want to develop the image of God, you need to be able to tell the difference between good and evil. And so, knowing that they had a higher purpose to serve, they decided that it would be the right thing to eat from the tree of knowledge so that they could differentiate between good and evil. By doing so, it turned out that even though God wanted them to differentiate between good and evil, but actually the differentiation was much, much easier. They could have just understood that not eating from the tree of knowledge was in fact being able to differentiate between good and evil. They didn't need something extra. The question was built into them already. The ability to differentiate between good and evil was already inside them. But they looked for a technical way to do this. Today, we wouldn't say that the serpent said, eat from the tree of knowledge in order to differentiate between good and evil. We would say that the serpent told them, if you want to be godly, knowing good and evil, not the difference between good and evil, but knowing good and evil, like we discussed last week, that there's a level at which God is almost removed. He's objective from reality. And he looks at good and evil equally. We said that was the outlook of Avimelech, who came to Abraham and made his claims against holiness and said, you're acting as if good and evil are the same. You should have taken a stance. You should have said what's right and what's wrong. But you didn't. And so I can only understand from that you're like God. There's an aspect of God who doesn't care. He's transcendent to this whole story that we go through. And everything is in the end relative. Everything is moral relativism in the end. Because one thing's good and the other thing's evil. In the eyes of one person it's good and the other of another person it's evil. It's all relative. The whole point of human existence is like what Rebecca here demonstrates. That even though Eliezer, Abraham's servant, could have done this himself, he could have done it himself. She understood that the question is not whether the other guy, the person that needs my act of loving kindness, needs it or not. It's more an internal question for me. It's an internal question of where do I stand? If I stand on the side of good, of doing acts of loving kindness, then everything that will come out of me is going to be upright, it's going to be steadfast, it's going to be honest, it's going to be moral. If I find excuses for why I don't need to do it, then I haven't taken my stance yet. I haven't really differentiated between living my life with the understanding that character creates good and that I need to have character, and even when it's difficult, I need to continue pursuing the good. And I've just put off the decision for a later date. And therefore, she would not have been the right girl for Isaac, whom Abraham was hoping would beget a people whose essence would be to always differentiate between good and evil, even if it seems to be just an internal moral decision, that it has nothing to do with reality. Maybe reality will get along just fine. Eliezer will get along just fine, his camels are just fine, everything's just fine. No need to actually exert myself in this case. But by choosing to exert herself, even in a situation like this, when it wasn't clear even what she was doing, and this is where it's really difficult, again, that the moral decision is one that happens internally. And sometimes you can't even look at reality and ask whether the moral decision I'm going to make, is that going to make a difference in the world or not? I'm always moved by a story I heard about the Kloisenberger Rebbe. He was one of the holy people, pious, before the Holocaust, and he was in the Holocaust, he was in Auschwitz, he survived. And one of the stories that he told was that when he was in the trains leading to Auschwitz, and people were dying from thirst and from starvation in the car itself, the cattle car. He knew it was Shabbat, he knew it was Shabbos, and he collected himself, and he said to himself, now is the afternoon meal. I don't have anything to eat, I can't do anything, but every Shabbat, when the afternoon meal came, I used to speak words of Torah. And he sat down in a corner, and he acted as if he was at his home, in his synagogue with his disciples, and he spoke. He said he could hardly speak, he could hardly get a word out, but he spoke for 2 minutes, because the moral character begins on the inside. It's something that we develop on the inside, even when there's no one around to look at us. And when that is done correctly, when the person is standing for the good, even internally, even when there doesn't seem to be any kind of effect on their surroundings, that is how you start the Jewish people. That is who Rebecca is. She's the one who's worthy of being married to Isaac. And so at the end of our reading, we see that Eliezer, the servant, he places a bracelet on her, and he gives her 2, I believe it was earrings, and they allude to the 10 commandments. The bracelet was of a weight of 10 shekels, and the earrings were 5 and 5, alluding to how the 10 commandments contain 10 sayings altogether, and 5 are on one tablet and 5 on the other. This is the type of woman who, even at the age of 3, has true moral character and is worthy of being married to Isaac. Thank you for joining. Hope to see you tomorrow.